The wind whispered through the dense trees of the Appalachian foothills, carrying with it tales of old, of things best left forgotten. It was in the small, secluded town of Grafton, West Virginia, where the nights were darker and the silences were louder, that the legend of the Grafton Monster thrived. Chapter 1. The Disappearance. It was a crisp autumn evening when Sarah Matthews, a local schoolteacher, disappeared. Her cottage, perched on the edge of the woods, stood eerily silent. Sarah was a beloved figure in the town, known for her kindness and dedication to her students. When she failed to show up for work the next day, a sense of unease spread through the community. Sheriff Tom Harris led the search party into the woods. The trees loomed ominously, their bare branches like skeletal fingers against the twilight sky. The searchers called Sarah's name, their voices swallowed by the oppressive silence. They found no trace of her, except for her journal, lying open on the forest floor. The last entry read, "I hear it again, the heavy breathing outside my window. It watches." Chapter 2. The Legend. The town of Grafton had long been steeped in legends of the Grafton Monster, a hulking, headless creature that roamed the woods. Stories told of its massive, white body and the eerie, guttural sounds it made. Many dismissed these tales as mere folklore, but the older residents knew better. They remembered the stories passed down through generations of disappearances and strange sightings. Old Man Jenkins, the town's unofficial historian, had lived in Grafton his entire life. He claimed to have seen the monster once, as a young boy. It was bigger than any man, he would say, his voice trembling with age and fear. No head, just a huge, muscular body. It walked right past me, like I wasn't even there. I ran and never looked back. Chapter 3. The Investigation. Sheriff Harris, a pragmatic man, wasn't one to believe in legends, but Sarah's disappearance and the journal entry gnawed at him. He spent hours in the town's small library, poring over old newspapers and records. He found accounts of similar disappearances dating back to the early 1900s, each one accompanied by whispers of the Grafton Monster. Determined to uncover the truth, Harris organized another search party, this time with more men and better equipment. They ventured deeper into the woods, where the trees grew thicker and the light dimmer. As night fell, they made camp, the fire casting long shadows that danced in the darkness. Around midnight, a blood-curdling scream pierced the stillness. The men scrambled to their feet, their flashlights cutting through the blackness. They followed the sound to a clearing, where they found John Miller, one of the searchers, lying on the ground, his face pale and eyes wide with terror. It was here," he stammered. "Huge, no head it took Joe." Chapter 4. The Encounter. Sheriff Harris felt a chill run down his spine. He had known Joe Parker since childhood, and the thought of losing him to some mythical creature was unbearable. The search party pressed on, their fear turning into grim determination. They moved cautiously, their eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of the monster. Hours passed, and just as the first light of dawn began to creep through the trees, they saw it. The Grafton Monster stood at the edge of the clearing, its massive body illuminated by the pale light. It was just as the legends described, towering, muscular, and headless. It moved with a strange, almost graceful gait, as if it were gliding across the ground. The men froze, their hearts pounding in their chests. The monster turned towards them, its body heaving with each breath. Then, with a deafening roar, it charged. The search party scattered, firing their weapons in a desperate attempt to stop the beast. Bullets seemed to have little effect on the creature, and it swatted men aside with ease. Harris ran, his mind racing. He needed a plan, a way to stop this thing once and for all. He remembered Old Man Jenkins' story and how the monster had ignored him. Maybe it wasn't interested in those who didn't threaten it. Gathering his courage, Harris stood his ground, hoping his theory was correct. The Grafton Monster slowed, its heavy breaths echoing in the clearing. It came to a stop a few feet from Harris, its hulking form looming over him. Harris held his breath, his heart pounding in his ears. The monster seemed to study him for a moment, then turned and vanished into the woods. Chapter 5. The Revelation. The town of Grafton was never the same after that night. The search party returned, battered and shaken, with only a few survivors. Joe Parker's body was never found, and Sarah Matthews remained missing. The legend of the Grafton Monster grew, becoming a dark shadow over the town. Sheriff Harris spent the rest of his life trying to understand what he had seen. He continued to investigate, gathering stories and evidence, but the truth remained elusive. The monster, it seemed, was a force of nature, beyond human comprehension. Years later, as an old man, Harris sat in his office, looking at a map of the woods. He had marked every sighting, every disappearance, hoping to find a pattern. But the Grafton Monster remained a mystery, a legend that refused to be solved. One cold winter night, as the wind howled outside, Harris heard a familiar sound. The heavy breathing, the rustle of leaves. He knew then that the monster was back, watching. He stood up, his heart heavy with the weight of the past. The Grafton Monster was a part of Grafton, a dark and terrifying part of its history. Harris opened the door and stepped outside, into the freezing night. He walked towards the woods, his steps steady and sure. The legend of the Grafton Monster would continue, but he would face it one last time. The darkness swallowed him, and the wind whispered his name, carrying the tale of a man who dared to confront the unknown. Epilogue. The town of Grafton moved on, but the legend of the Grafton Monster endured. New generations heard the stories, and some claimed to have seen the creature themselves. The woods remained a place of fear and fascination, a reminder of the mysteries that lurk just beyond the edge of understanding. In a small, overgrown cemetery on the outskirts of town, a simple gravestone bears the name Tom Harris. Beside it, an old journal, weathered by time, tells the story of a man's encounter with a legend. The final entry reads, "It watches still. Some things are meant to remain a mystery." And so, the Grafton Monster continues to haunt the shadows, a silent guardian of the unknown, forever a part of the town's dark and eerie legacy.